we're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Thursday, July 16th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Kyle.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Also, June's with
Hello,
us.
Soo-jin.
Good to have you. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're approaching the end of the work week, and with Constitution Day coming up tomorrow, many people may be looking forward to a well-earned break. So whether you're traveling, relaxing at home, or catching up on personal goals, the holiday can also be a good opportunity to learn something new or brush up on a language. So today we're turning our attention to English education here in Korea and some of the unique challenges that learners might face. So Juyeon, obviously you are a legend in the English education field, so we're really excited to talk to you today about this. So in your experience, what makes English so difficult for beginners to learn?
Well, years of experience teaching English on various platforms and also on public educational broadcast, DBS, I have actually noticed a clear pattern here. The problem isn't about grammar, it's where we start. Well, instead of developing your confidence through speaking and listening, most learners start with grammar and reading, which are mainly focused on passing exams. If you study when you have to pass exam, you lose your interest very, very easily. So as a result, English learners often translate Korean to English into their heads before speaking English, which leads to unnatural expressions in English, and that is known as Konglish. Well, Konglish is a mix of Korean and English, including words like notebook, which means laptop in English, and in Korean we say handphone, 핸드폰, which means a mobile or a mobile phone, and they say I'll give you a morning call, which means I'll give you a wake-up call in English. And sometimes we say eye shopping, which means window shopping or browsing, and these are the expressions that native speakers don't actually use. So that's where the confusion begins.
I think my favorite is eye shopping, because I feel like it really represents what we're doing right now. We are shopping with our eyes. So what's your thoughts?
So Juhyun makes a really valid point. So for most Koreans, the starting point of learning English isn't about using it as a basic tool for communicate with others. Instead, it's viewed as a means to an end, whether that's passing exams, as Juhyun mentioned, getting into a good university, or landing a job. Because people rarely get a chance to actually talk in English, all the focus goes toward solving tricky, highly competitive exam questions. So as a result, Koreans end up dealing with overly complex, unnatural English, turning the language into a massive hurdle rather than a tool for connection.
Right. So on the flip side, you also see native speakers having difficulty solving like suneung questions, like college entrance exam English questions. So that's the ironic part. So it shows that the way we learn a language can really shape how we view it. And when English is mainly treated as a test subject rather than a tool for communication, it can feel much more difficult and intimidating than it actually is. So we're going to talk more about this, but first let's take a look at the screen. English is one of the most widely spoken languages in the world. As it is spread across different countries and cultures, people have adapted it to reflect their own languages and lifestyles. In Korea, this has given rise to Konglish, a collection of English-inspired words and expressions with a distinctly Korean twist. Today on News Generation, we explore what Konglish is, why it has become an unexpected trend among Gen Z overseas, and how other countries have developed their own localized forms of English. As you saw in a video, Konglish is no longer simply seen as a quirky feature of English use in Korea. And in some cases, it is becoming part of a global pop culture. So how did Konglish become so cool among young people in Korea? Because before, people used to be embarrassed to not speak proper English.
That's right. Well, Konglish has actually become very famous thanks to Korean wave.
Oh, of course.
Yes, of course, Korean culture. Korean has become a trendy insider language among Gen Z who are living overseas. So thanks to K-pop, K-drama, they have gained international fans. So Konglish expressions like fighting, fighting. It's not like about fighting. It means like good luck, you can do it. And sometimes they use skinship in Korean dramas, which means not about skinship, it's a physical affection or friendly physical attack you do with your friends. And comeback, which means an artist's new album is coming back to our life, a promotional album, a return that is. And sometimes they use killing part in K-pop industry. It means the most memorable and or the highlight part of a song, or it could be a performance. And sometimes they use fan service. Yes, it's kind of a gesture, special interactions they have with their fans, kind of a meeting they do. And these other words have become surprisingly familiar overseas. And there's so many internet memes because they use these words in their subtitles, titles on YouTube channels as well. So even if they're not standard English. And the same trend can be seen in Korean cosmetic industry as well. Well, you know, K-beauty is quite famous around the world. As Korean cosmetics become more popular worldwide, terms such as cushion compact meaning a compact foundation with a sponge, and a mask pack. Yes, mask pack is a facial mask, a sheet mask for skincare, and essence means a lightweight skincare product. And the last one is foundation, one of the skin products as well, a makeup product. So they are often written in English, exactly as they are used in Korea. So who knew Konglish could become a global language?
So it is fascinating to see expressions once dismissed as incorrect English gaining international popularity through Korean culture, and it looks like various different types of Korean culture. And as Konglish has gained wider recognition abroad, attitudes toward have also shifted here in Korea, as Chien has told us. So how have then Korean attitudes toward Konglish kind of evolved over the years, Kyle?
Yes. So in the past, even myself growing up, we Koreans used to worry about using Konglish and thinking of it as bad or something broken English. But today, the way we look at it has completely changed. Rather than seeing it as a mistake, Koreans now treat Konglish as a unique culture and a fun form of play, like a wordplay. It's become a creative way to play with the language and express ourselves. In fact, we are constantly coming up with new words even now. For example, people use the phrase sexy food, like sexy food in Korean accent to describe something incredibly delicious. And also terms like tetto and egen, which are short for testosterone and estrogen. It's not about just the hormone, it about describe people's personality types or vibes.
So it's quite a turnaround actually from something people try to avoid to something that's now recognized and even understood abroad. And of course, many Konglish expressions are so common that we don't even realize they're uniquely Korean anymore. So what are some then classic Konglish words that might surprise foreigners?
Classic ones. There's plenty of classic examples I have brought here. Well, here are some of the most classical examples that might surprise you. First one, take one room, for example. In English, we'd normally say studio or studio apartment, but in Korea, people call it a one room because the apartment consists of a single room. Another perfect example is meeting. Yes, in English, a meeting is usually for work or business. Of course, in Korea, we use this term meeting when it comes to business environment, but sometimes meeting refers to a group blind date between men and women in universities. So these words may sound like English, meeting in one studio, but their meanings have evolved in Korean, uniquely Korean ways. So it's English, obviously, with a Korean twist.
And I can see why it's taking off because looking at you explain what these words mean, and like for example, meeting or they all make sense. Studio,
right.
like one room, it makes sense. I mean, we just look at the images, it's quite clear why it is that. So, do you have anything to add?
Oh, like to add about the meeting thing is like when you use a meeting in a different like age range, I guess. If you use meeting in college, that means like the blind date.
Oh, you're right.
But like I don't know, when you got a job, then it's talk about like the actual
Job
meeting.
interview.
Yes.
True.
So like it changed over time too. And then other perfect model examples would be the word service and spec. So in Korea, service doesn't mean a customer assistance. It refers to a freebie or something given on the house as a warm gesture of kindness, like complimentary food. On the other hand, spec, which usually refers to product specifications in English, is used in Korea to describe a person's specification, like a resume. It includes their like academic backgrounds, GPA, language test scores, certifications, and extracurricular activities.
So to get a more international perspective on this trend, we're going to soon speak live with a young American in the US. And that conversation is coming up right after break, so stay with us.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out Channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
We're now joined by Jatsia, Gen Z from the US, who has studied and worked in both the US and Korea. So hello, Jatsia. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So how did you first come across Konglish, and do you use or are you familiar with any Konglish words?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been learning Korean for a long time, and Konglish was one of the first things that I learned actually, because I think for English native speakers, when you're learning from English, a lot of the websites, they'll introduce you to Konglish as an easy way to practice reading Hangul, since the words are familiar to you, but you have to pronounce it in a Korean accent, and it has a different meaning than you expect. So it's kind of like a very simple way to get introduced to the language and get used to the sounds. So it was very quickly introduced to me, but those were words like ice cream or like chocolate, like things that mean the same thing in English versus Korean. But then when I moved to Korea and I was speaking Korean in my daily life, there were some words I didn't know, and I would point to things and be like, oh, how do I say this? And it would be like an outlet, and people would say consent. And I would get very confused, like that's not what consent means in English. And so that's when I really discovered that Konglish is like an entirely different thing than just English loanwords. So it was something I learned like slowly over time. And I definitely continue to use them in my daily life because I think that it's very impossible to speak Korean in a casual setting without using Konglish words or even just English loanwords, because if you use just native Korean, it's going to sound much more formal. So it's just such an integrated part of Korean speech that if you're living over there and speaking it, you kind of have to use Konglish.
Okay, and then now I want to know, since you know so many Konglish words, so what Konglish words would resonate the most with young Americans then?
I think there are some that people who enjoy Hallyu already know. Those would be more slang words like fighting or like gogo. Like so I know some people who like K-pop or dramas who already say those, and those like come from English, like word go or fighting. And then the song Apatsu got pretty famous, and so there's a lot of English speakers who are very familiar with that word too. And so I think some words that are fun to say and are shortened versions of English words like Apatsu, those might catch on because it's like a quicker and fun way to say it. But then some that I catch myself saying, even in English, are some of like the functional ones, like menu, for example. So in English, if you point to a specific thing on a menu, you have to say menu item, but in Korean, you could just say menu. And so sometimes I ask my friends, what menu do you want? And they get really confused because you have to specify that more. But I think the shortening of it, if more people knew that word existed, I think more people would say it. Same with things like remocon or aircon, because like it's just a shorter way to say a long word. And again, it's more fun to say it that way. And then other words that are useful but that don't exist in English really, like skinship or service. I think those might catch on as well, since they're concepts that we kind of wish to be able to explain but don't have a single one word for it. So I also use the word skinship a lot in my daily life, and I've had to explain it to my friends who only speak English, and then they start using it as well once they learn the concept.
I see, Jazia, and you are actually using the right pronunciation. It's not apartment, it's apate, that's right. Well, anyhow, have you come across any English-inspired slang in other languages?
I haven't come across too much slang because Korea is the only other country that I've lived in, and I think to learn slang, you have to kind of live within the community. But I'm Puerto Rican and my mom speaks fluent Spanish and she's a Spanish teacher. So she'll come home sometimes and go on rants about how her students want to just say the English versions of words in Spanish accents because apparently in their home countries and also in Puerto Rico, where we're from, words like emparedado, which means sandwich, instead of saying that full word, more people, like almost everyone, just says un sandwich at this point. And so there's definitely a lot of, I guess, simplification of words by just turning it into English that I see, especially in Spanish. And I had a lot of like Chinese friends in high school who instead of, and I studied Chinese for a year, and I know that the way to say goodbye is 再见, but instead of saying that, they would always go bye bye, or hi to say hello instead of ni hao. And I always thought that was really interesting. So a lot of introductions I've seen when I speak with people from other countries, they'll use the English versions instead.
I think hearing you explain like what this looks like in other languages makes me realize why Konglish is kind of catching on. It's quite addicting and it's just fun as well.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing insights with us today, Jazia.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We just heard from a young American who has experienced firsthand how Konglish is becoming part of everyday conversations among fans of Korean culture, highlighting just how far these uniquely Korean expressions have really traveled abroad. And Konglish is far from the only example of English evolving as it crosses borders. So how has English been adapted in other parts of the world, June?
Well, this is not actually happening just in Korea. As you may know, it's a very natural result of English becoming the world's most popular international language. Well, think about it. Out of 1.5 billion people around the world who speak English, only about 400 million of them are actually native speakers as their first language. That means most English speakers use it alongside with their own local language, their mother tongue, and culture is also mixed as well. So English naturally mixes with the language, the local languages, and develops into new forms around the world with their own culture. So for example, we have Konglish in Korea, but in Japan they have wase이에이고, Japan and English.
Oh, how cute.
Japan made English, that's right, which is similar to Konglish, that is. Well, they have expressions like salaryman, which means an office worker, and a baby car, which means a pushchair, it's so cute, stroller. And they say in Japan, sharp pencil, which is a mechanical pencil in English. And also similar forms do exist in Europe as well. In Germany, they have a Denglish form a blend of German and English. And when we move to France, they have franglais, a mixture of French and English as well. So Konglish isn't an exception. It's part of a much broader global language trend.
I mean, it's fascinating that English isn't simply replacing local languages, it's blending with them to create entirely new ways of communicating, and we're seeing that all over the world. And much of that change seems to be driven by younger generations. So why do they tend to mix English with their own language so often these days?
Yes, so I think there are multiple reasons behind it, but let me point out some of the reasons. So with the rise of social media, now we are constantly exposed to content from different language zones, which has naturally increased our opportunities to exchange ideas. And as Juhyun mentioned, since English is the most widely understood language, people end up communicating in English, even if it's a bit awkward, regardless of what their native language is, because at least we all know what yes and no means. We all know how to count. We know what good and bad means. Also, on top of that, easier global travel has led to massive wave of migration to English-speaking countries since the 20th century. Now we have second and third generation Asians, Europeans who grew up embracing both cultures. As they naturally mix and blend their languages, it has a significant impact on how we communicate today.
Right, so it seems that for many young people, mixing languages isn't considered a mistake anymore. It's simply another way to express themselves and the culture that they're from. And that raises a broader question about what language is ultimately meant to actually achieve. So as someone who actually teaches English, what are your personal opinions and how do you view people that tend to mix Korean and English together?
So I don't completely against it under one condition, as long as the speaker actually knows the original correct expression. So language, after all, is a social agreement. So if it helps members of society communicate more efficiently, there are no reasons to restrict it. For instance, when Koreans refer to media content, instead of saying content as a singular form, Koreans use a plural form, contents.
That's true.
Like 콘텐츠, social media, 콘텐츠 creator. Even though it differs from native language grammar, I advise my Korean students that they don't need to stick strictly to the singular content when speaking with other Koreans. Like in the meeting, you don't have to use content as a singular form strictly, because in daily life, it's often better to adapt to how language is practically used in your social environment. But again, as long as the speaker actually knows the original correct expression.
So what are your thoughts on it? Do you agree with what he said?
Well, yeah, I do. And I do believe that it depends on the purpose of learning English. Well, if someone is studying for exam, they have to pass this certain exam, or
Right.
they've got to work in an English-speaking environment, then of course they've got to learn proper English that native speakers use. But at the end of the day, the main purpose of learning language is to chit-chat, to communicate with other people. So as translanguage becomes more common these days, people from different cultural backgrounds may actually find it easier to understand each other. So I don't think translanguaging is simply incorrect English. I see it as a natural way, a different form for languages and cultures to interact each other. So after all, being understood is more important than being perfect.
Right. So language is something that is constantly evolving, and Konglish is just one example of how cultures influence one another. So whether it's Konglish, Singlish, or other local expressions, these unique blends remind us that language is ultimately about connection. And as our world becomes more connected, perhaps the way we communicate will continue to evolve with it. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But because tomorrow is Constitution Day in Korea, News Gen will be back on Monday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Kyle.
It was so much fun. Thank you.
And also
Thank you
Chun.
for having me.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Whether you're speaking English or Konglish, we hope your longer weekend is full of fighting. We are
News Generation.